Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fighter Heart podcast. I'm sitting here with Tiffany Yu. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on today. So what we're doing, we like to get right into it here on Fighter Heart. So if you could just give me a brief description about who you are and where you grew up, and then get into your Fighter Heart story. We'll take it from there.
Sure. My name is Tiffany Yu. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, about 20 minutes outside of D.C. in Maryland. And today I'm a disability advocate, and I'm actually author of this forthcoming book called the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, which ties into my fighter heart story, which is essentially my why behind why I wrote this book and how I became a disability advocate. So about 27 years ago, on a car ride home with my dad and a couple of my siblings, he unfortunately lost control of the car, and I ended up breaking a couple bones in one of my legs that would leave me as a temporary wheelchair user for about 4 months. And then I also ended up permanently paralyzing one of my arms, my dominant arm at the time, known as a brachial plexus injury.
Mm.
Much later, I'd be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder because in addition to all of those injuries that I sustained, my dad also unfortunately passed away from that accident.
Jesus. What was your first thoughts? Like, were you conscious or did you like wake up in the hospital or something?
So I woke up in a helicopter, which at the time it was on its way to Children's National Hospital, which is in Washington, D.C. And I don't know. I mean, honestly, when I woke up in the hospital, I was just so tired. All I wanted to do was sleep, and there was someone hovering over me who kept forcing my eyelids open
Mm.
to make sure that I remained conscious. But I was just really tired. I think that was the first thing. I don't think I felt the severity of my injuries per se. Like if you think about paralyzing your arm, that is an arm that is forcibly pulled, right? The nerves are stretched or torn. Um, I don't know if I felt any pain per se, or not that I would remember. And then I will say, so I ended up staying at the hospital for 3 weeks afterward. And I don't think, and I was 9 years old at the time, I don't think that I really comprehended or understood what had happened. And it's interesting because I'm actually curating some content that's focused on helping kids learn about disabilities. And I had written a script about the car accident and how I became disabled. And the feedback I got was that talking about the car accident was too graphic and talking about my injuries was too complicated for kids.
Mm.
And I was just like, and I was a kid and I had to go through that, through the complicated, too advanced, too graphic things.
Of course, yeah, you learned a lot that, I mean, oof. So I can't even imagine. So you wake up in the hospital, did they tell you right away, like your arm, you couldn't use your arm anymore, or you're gonna have to be in a wheelchair now?
I I'm not sure. The first thing I remember, so we had actually dropped my mom off at the airport. The first thing that happened when I got to the hospital, or at least that I remember, was seeing my mom cry. And I've actually only seen her cry. I'm 36 now. I've only seen her cry twice in my entire life. One time was there, seeing her there in my hospital room, and then the other was at my dad's funeral. And and I don't know, I was also like surprised because she was supposed to be on a flight. So yeah, I think, I not only think back to this content I'm curating for kids and how like so many topics are like too at like how do you make things kid appropriate, right? Is like back when I was 9 years old and this happened, like how do you make it kid appropriate as well? So I don't think I again, I don't think I really understood my arm at the time. They had put in a sling, but I didn't know like what had happened to it. And I
Mm.
had a cast that covered almost the entirety of my left leg. And again, I think the thing I was more excited about was that I got to pick like the color of the cast. So I picked this neon rainbow color, right? It's like at that age, and I actually think now with the emergence of social media, maybe we're maybe kids are becoming even more advanced. But I think I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. And I actually think I'm not quite sure when my dad did pass away, but I think they brought him to an adult hospital nearby. And it wasn't until a little bit later that it was pronounced that he had passed away.
Yeah. So you were there for 3 weeks, you said, in the hospital?
I was there for 3 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas, those 3 weeks.
Oh my God.
I know it was a
Keep
whole
adding
thing.
to the story. Yeah.
What's that?
You keep adding on to the
I
story.
know this is why it's the fighter heart story. I mean, and it also the accident was also the day after my dad's 49th birthday. So it was Thanksgiving, which is about gratitude and family, and then you have a birthday, which is about celebration of life and bringing people together to celebrate. And then all of a sudden, November 29th, 1987 is a day that I don't know if I dread it as much now that this much time has passed, but it was a day that I dreaded. It just reminded me that everything changed, right? And this holiday, I had a really hard time understanding gratitude, I think, after that for a long period of time.
I mean, when you're 9, I don't think you even know what that feels like to.
Yeah.
But I guess eventually, when in your teens, probably you started really thinking about it. About
Yeah.
what.
Actually, it was really, and I'm like really into dates. So it was 2016 and Small Business Saturday had become a thing. So this is about 19 years after the accident. And I'm like scrolling on Instagram and I see this hoodie that says, "My heart is full." And I was like, what does that mean? And I kind of want that. So I bought 2 of the hoodies. I bought one in a dark gray and one in a light gray. And that actually became my phrase for the year. My heart is full, because I really wanted to understand what it felt like to be grateful. And there's a quote that actually really resonates with me now that was shared with me during the pandemic. And it's a quote from someone named Francis Weller. And the quote says, "The work of the mature person is to carry grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and to be stretched large by them. How much sorrow can I hold? That's how much gratitude I can give." And I will say that, not only as 9 teens, I thought that the only place I could be was in my grief.
Yeah.
And I think buying that sweatshirt and being on this like gratitude journey over the last, what is it, 8 years now, has really encouraged me that, okay, I sat in the depths of grief for that long period of time. And now I'm ready to receive and be open to being grateful.
Oh, that's so cool. See, I mean, it changed everything, right? Changed your whole life.
It did.
Yeah. So going back actually now to when you get out of the hospital, is there, I guess you were 9 years old, but is there like a rehab kind of process that do you remember?
Yeah. So again, I was a temporary wheelchair user. So broken bones heal. Nerve injuries, kind of, you hope that they come back, and sometimes they never come back in the same way. So I had a 4-month rehabilitation period where I was still using this manual wheelchair, and I was homeschooled for that period of time. And also relearning how to write with my non-dominant hand. So I relearned how to write with my left hand during that period of time too.
Gotcha. So where, like, now, like you're going through school, you're getting older, are you fascinated in like helping other people that have been disabled, become disabled? When does that start kicking in?
Yeah, such a good question. So one other piece of this is, and one thing I'm also learning more recently is I'm the daughter of Asian immigrants. So my dad is from Taiwan, my mom is from Vietnam. And in my family's culture, you don't want to share anything that might make your family look bad. So
Yeah.
the car accident, something like traumatic, like a car accident happening, a death in the immediate family, and now me acquiring disabilities were all seen as shameful. So I had internalized not to tell anyone about them, for fear that our family was bad luck and that we would rub our bad luck off on other people. I have a lot of compassion and grace to understanding that my parents' generation believe something different than I do. Sometimes car accidents just happen. There's no reason. It's not tied to any bad luck or anything.
Yeah.
It's just an unfortunate thing that happened. So for 12 years after I became disabled, I actually didn't tell anyone about it. I wore long sleeves all the time. And I'm starting to like, I call it like selective memory due to trauma, but I remember sharing about my dad on the anniversary, not only on his birthday, but also the anniversary of his death. And I got a note from someone I went to elementary school with who said, Tiffany, I knew about the car accident and I knew about your arm, but I didn't know about your dad. And then I'll like meet up with a friend from high school and he goes, Tiffany, I knew about your arm, but I just assumed it was from birth. So I'm now putting together pieces of these
Yeah.
secrets of things that I didn't share about my own story. But really, I want to say that in addition to not sharing that much about being disabled growing up, I had also internalized that as an Asian American, I shouldn't draw any attention to my race. So I didn't really lean into the fact that I am Taiwanese Vietnamese until I got to college. And
Mm.
I met a couple other Taiwanese people during freshman orientation. And I made a joke about how we should start a club. And, freshman year, you're like trying to go figure out who your friends are. So you're finding anything that any commonality. And I really hadn't leaned into being Taiwanese, but we would become the co-founders of the Taiwanese club. And once I had started this Taiwanese club and I was very actively involved from freshman, sophomore, junior year, it gave me a sense of pride, identity, culture, history, like friends who all shared this identity. And it made me really curious. This is where Tiffany, so I call myself Tiffany, the community builder first, because I knew how to build communities. I was not very far from a disability advocate. I would not even label myself, but I said, I know how to start communities. I did this for my Taiwanese identity, and it's been really helpful. I'm really curious how it might be able to support being disabled, and if there might be other people at this university who could benefit from a club or visibility of this identity, of this disability identity and this disability community. So
Yeah.
that was 2009. So 1997 car accident, 2009. And 2009 was the first time I ever publicly shared about the car accident. So I think before it was like on a need to know basis, like for PE class growing up, I'd have my mom write a note for me, and then letting people know if there were different activities or something, but always very like privately and hushed. And then 2009 was the first time it was like, I'm going to share this story and see if other people see parts of themselves in it. Because not only is this a disability story, it's a story of grief. It's a story of the loss of childhood innocence, adverse childhood experiences, which I wish that didn't exist, right? But things happen to kids where they can't be kids anymore.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Like you said before, you have to deal with those things that you don't know how to explain in a kid's book as a kid.
Yeah.
I hear you. So you put out this public post and you explain your story and you start getting feedback. Where does that lead to next? That gets us to where we are now.
Yeah, so I will say, so in 2009, so we're turning 15, Diversibility is turning 15 this year, which is very exciting. A couple things happened. So I had this idea to start the Disability Student Club, and I told my Taiwanese roommate, even my roommate, is part of the Taiwanese club. So I told her and she goes, oh, that's such a great idea. I'll support you. And then I talked to a couple other people who I think would have been interested in it. And what ended up happening was I was told the idea was too radical and that the university wasn't ready. But I'm stubborn. So I said, you know what, I'm going to try. And I start posting up some flyers around campus with an email address. My name isn't on it, nothing. And all of a sudden, I start getting emails to that email address from people I know who have chronic illnesses, vision disorders, right? Not apparent disabilities. And actually 70 to 80% of disabilities you can't see. They're not visible right away. And so then I was like, wow, I think there are more of us out there than we know. And we started growing from there. And for me in 2009, if I got 20 to 30 people to join an event, and 50 people on our email list, which were our milestones that we achieved at the time, I was feeling great.
Yeah, of course. There is a
Now
lot.
in 2024, with TikTok and things like that, I have a series about disability allyship that has over 5 million views.
Mm.
And the community that we've built that started in person as a student club has grown into this social movement that has over 80,000 people across our digital ecosystem.
That's impressive. It's very cool.
It's cool.
Yeah,
It's
it's amazing. It's like
Yeah, and I think people look at it and they forget. I never want to forget that 12-year period where I just felt like my voice and my story didn't matter. And I also don't want to forget 2009, how hard it was to get anyone to join. And interestingly enough, the first members of Diversability were my Taiwanese American peers. And even like the logo that we used for the first 10 years of Diversability was created by my Taiwanese American peer. So this is where like cross solidarity, like allyship across different identities and showing up for each other comes into play.
So Diversability started when you were in college.
When I was in college. Started as a student club, very informal. We ended up relaunching kind of like as a meetup group in 2015 and hosted the first event in New York City. That's where I was living at the time. And 70 people came. We actually like sold out. 70 was considered selling out. And afterward, everyone come to me and they said, "What's next? When's the next event?" And it made me realize, I mean, now there are so many disability events. You said where are you based?
New York.
Oh, yeah. Right now, there are so many events happening in New York. I currently live in LA. I also did a stint in San Francisco. But back in 2015, there wasn't that much going on. And so after hosting a couple of these meetup events, someone came to me and they said, "Hey, you should really think about like incorporating or becoming a nonprofit," because we were so informal at the time. And then we did. And now, we were part of Meta's Community Accelerator Program. We actually received a $60,000 award earlier this year to support small businesses.
Sweet.
So it's been good. And yeah, I still can't believe that we have grown this much, and we are as large as we are. But it also just reminds me that I just don't want disabled people to experience what I did as a kid and feel as alone in my experience that first decade.
Yeah, of course. That's a great mission. Is this a nonprofit or is it like an LLC, a business?
We're hybrid. So we do run kind of like a membership community where we're focused on kind of helping our members up level in terms of their advocacy, like how can you make a career out of your advocacy? How can you get featured on podcasts like this? If you need any other guests that you want on who have incredible stories to share, we can definitely curate some.
That's all we do is these kind of stories. So
but we have a nonprofit arm that helps cover scholarships and sliding scale memberships, like discounted rates for people who want to join or be part of our programming.
Very cool. But it just started off as a meetup and then you started adding that on, I guess, years later, those kind of layers.
Yeah, it's been very cool. And then ultimately it led to a book coming out, and I feel very excited. We got to put Diversability's logo on the front. But yeah, it's been quite the journey.
What can we learn if we buy the book? What are we gonna see in there?
So I started, I've been doing some version of this work for 15 years. I've been building communities for 15 years, but also getting to know the disability community. And part of what we didn't talk about was I actually started my career in financial services. So I was working on Wall Street. And while I was working at one of these big banks, I got very actively involved in their disability employee resource group, like the disability community that exists in the company. And then at a later company, I ended up co-founding their disability employee resource group, which is now turning 11 this year. So I've just been building disability communities because I just see the value in it. So this book, over the years, a lot of people have come and asked me, "Hey, how can I show up better for the disability community? Like, what needs to happen for us to build a more disability inclusive world or build a world where all of us can thrive?" And I would argue that I feel like the disability community is probably one of the most marginalized communities of all, and then you add in other layers of identity and it becomes like compounded experience of oppression. But this book, it follows a framework called Me, We, Us, which is a transformative social impact, social change framework to say, What are the things you need to know to show up better for the disability community? What are the things that we need to know as a community in relation to each other? Like, how do we call out and call in microaggressions? Like telling a disabled person they're inspiring for simply existing, or offering them unsolicited advice about their medical conditions, which I'm pretty sure they're working with their health teams with that very intimately. To then us, which is what needs to happen in a more systemic level, or even in our workplaces, to create a level of psychological safety where people feel more comfortable asking for the things that they need in the workplace. And I will share that, I was actually just on a call yesterday with someone who has a non-apparent disability who hasn't shared it publicly with anyone because they're not sure how their workplace is going to react, right? But if we are able to prioritize accessibility first, like embed accessibility into everything we do, then people don't have to out themselves. They know that it's okay to ask for the things that you need, or ask that captions can be turned on, and nobody will think that it's a weird thing, So part of it is, yes, we've had a law in place for 34 years that are technically supposed to protect our rights here in the US, called the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yep.
But we're still seeing very rampant discrimination, and our unemployment numbers are twice that of our non-disabled peers. So there's still something missing. And that something to me is the hearts and minds, the attitudes. And that's to me what I hope this book will be. Because you can implement any policies you want, but if you don't truly believe that disabled people can be your peers and equals, then you're not going to implement them in a way that's going to create lasting change or safety for them.
Yeah, I think it's information people need, because I mean, I think most people don't mean any harm by it. If they're saying like, I'm inspired by you, like they're trying to be nice probably. And they don't know that it's a microaggression, I don't think, in most cases. So
yeah, and that's the thing about microaggressions, right? Is like they're usually well-intentioned, and people don't realize it. And so I actually found a question recently that said, if you took disability out of the picture, would you still find that person inspiring? And I feel like that's a really good like reframe question to say, okay, because right now we're getting ready for the Paris Paralympics. If I took their disabilities out of the picture, they are still elite athletes who are competing, and elite. And so there's nuance, right? Where that I feel like is inspiring, right? Again, it's if you take disability, like I have some friends who are wheelchair users who get like pat on the head, or people like congratulate them on going to shop at the grocery store or even getting out of the house. And I do see a response, but it actually happens more than you think. So if we can relay the message over to you, Joe, and then you can help relay that message over to your peers in your network, then we'll continue to spread the message and better understand how we can show up better.
Yeah, ripple effect.
Yes.
It'll ripple out. Awesome. Well, I look forward to reading the book. I know we're wrapping it up now. I just wanted to get some words of advice, if you could talk to your younger self, like 9-year-old you, if just you just was talking to her and give her some sort of advice.
Yeah. 9-year-old Tiffany is actually the why behind my work. But what I would tell her is, and I'll show you, I dedicated the book to her, to 9-year-old Tiffany. But here's what I would tell her. I would tell her, things are really hard right now, and you've experienced things that I hope other people your age don't have to experience until later. But I'm really excited for you to find your voice and for you to see who you become, because it will be beyond your wildest dreams. And I know you feel really alone right now, but you're going to find your people.
Very well said, Tiffany. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We really appreciate it. Where can we find you on social media and website and stuff like that? We'll put it in the description too.
Yeah, so you can find me at tiffanyyu.com, TIFFANYYU.com, and that will have all the links to my social. You can learn more about the book there as well. Pre-orders and orders all matter a lot. If you are curious, check out the book. You can even request it from your local library or check it out from the library. So lots of ways. And I also wrote the book too, because it was like, yes, we've grown our community, we're hosting these events, but is there a way that other people can engage in our work through my writing? How can we scale this work as well? But yeah, feel free to get in touch. Find me at tiffanyyu.com, and I'm Tiffany Yu across social platforms.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Tiffany. We'll talk to you soon. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much.